files. So let's go back to our curriculum page. All right, so what you want to do is you want to click on right here, project folder for unit 1. Click on that link right there, and then right here you're going to click and download this zip file. So I'll click on that. Okay, now I'm going to move my web browser out of the way for a moment, and I'm going to bring up my Finder, or you can bring up your file browser if you're working in Windows. So under downloads right here, what I want to do is I want to move this file from my downloads folder to my documents. So I'll move this into documents right here. What I want to do is put this unit 1 zip file into my Maya projects folder. Now this is a folder that I created inside my documents folder, so you'll have to create a folder with the same title. If you don't want to put it there, you can put it in any folder that you want, but when I reference files in these lessons, I'm going to be going to this folder with this title. Okay, so if you want to just make it easy on yourself so that when you're looking at stuff, it's the same exact thing as what I'm looking at, put your unit 1 project folder inside _ Maya projects. So I'll take this, I'll drag it into Maya projects, and then once it's in there, I'm going to double click on it to unzip it. I'll delete the original zip file. So here I have my project folder. It's copied to the computer. All right, so now we need to tell Maya where the project folder is. So I'm going to go up to File and then go down to Set Projects. And I'll click on Documents. I'll double click on Maya Projects. And then to set my project folder, it's a single click. So you click once on the project folder, and then you press the Set button. Now from here, I want to verify that I've set the project folder correctly. So I'm going to go to File and then Open Scene. And these are all the Unit 1 exercise files. So if you see these files, you know that you set your project folder correctly. If you don't see these files, go through the video again and make sure you follow the instructions precisely. Now that we've set our project folder, we can go ahead and start with the first file. And I'm going to pull down to Open Scene and click once on the mouse. All right, so what I have here are a bunch of different Maya files that are in the Unit 1 project folder. If you don't see these files right here, go ahead and raise your hand and ask for help from the instructor. All right, if you see this list of files, click once on Channel Box and then click on the Open button right down here. Okay, so there's nothing in this scene, so we don't need to save it. Okay, so what we have is a very basic scene here in Maya, and before we dive into working with these objects, I want to talk about the two different interface items that we're going to be using. So this large gray area with this grid on it, this is called a panel, and down at the bottom of a panel we have in white text the name of that particular panel. So this is labeled Persp, that's for perspective. And there are other types of panels that we'll be using, other angles, other cameras, but for now we're just going to use the perspective panel. Over here we have something called the channel box. Now information that's in your scene when it's selected will show up over here in the channel box. If you don't see your channel box over here, click on this button right here to show or hide the channel box. Okay, so let's start working with some of these objects. I'm going to click on this small red sphere right here. Now when I select it, what happens is the outline of that shape turns green. Also over here in the channel box I can see it says red _ sphere. So this object has been named over here in the channel box. If I click on a different object, I'm just going to use my left mouse button to click on the green sphere. I can see over here in the channel box the name has changed because I've selected a different sphere in my scene. I'll click on the blue sphere. You can watch this change, the name change right here. Same with the purple sphere. Let's go back to the red sphere and let's take a look at some of the channels that we are working with here. I've got Translate X, Translate Y, and Translate Z. And if I look under Translate X, it says I have a value of 1. Now if I look over here on my grid, where these two lines meet, these two darker gray lines, this is the origin or 0 on the grid. And if I look over here, this line here is labeled positive x. So then if we look back over here at the translate x and it says a value of 1, we can see that it is 1 unit away from the origin, or 0 on the grid. So I'm going to go ahead and type in a different value. I'm going to type in 2 and then I'll press return. And you can see now my sphere has moved 2 units away from the origin, or 0 on the grid. So what I want to do is I want to move each of these smaller spheres into the corresponding larger sphere of the same color. Okay, so I'm going to type in another value here. I'll type in 4 and then press return. And I can see I'm 1 unit away from getting this sphere inside this target. So I'll type in 5 and press return, and I can see, okay, now I've got that sphere in that target. All right, I'm going to click on the green sphere right here. And on the green sphere, I can see for over here in the channel box, it says translate Z is -1. Okay, so that's 1 unit away from the origin, or 0, on the Z axis. Okay, and we can see here I have a negative Z going this direction and positive Z going this direction. So what I'll do is I'll type in a value that I think will be the final destination of this smaller sphere so that it fits inside the larger sphere. So I'm going to type in translate Z of -3. I can see I didn't quite estimate the right number, so then I'll just type in a new number. I'll type in -4 and press return. So now I've moved that green sphere into its target. So I'm going to go over here and click on the blue sphere. I can see right here I'm back to translate X, but this time it's a negative value instead of a positive value. So this direction would be positive X, and this direction is -X. So I'll click on this. I'll type in -3, press return. I can see I've moved that object into that target. All right, now I'm going to click on the purple sphere. Okay, I'm back to my Translate Z channel. Now I'm on, right here I have a positive number, so I can tell that I'm moving along the Z-axis in a positive direction. So I'll just click on Translate Z. I'll type in, let's say 4, and I've got it into the target. All right, so this is a good point to save your work. So let's go up to File and then pull down to Save Scene. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to show you something else, and this is the Layer Editor, which is right below the channel box. Over here, I have a number of different layers in my scene, and you can show or hide these layers by clicking on this first box, the box that's all the way to the left. Okay, so here I have a layer named Objects 1. I'm going to click on the V, and you can see that the objects that we moved have now disappeared. I've turned off the visibility of those shapes. I'm now going to switch to Targets 1, and I'll click on the V, make that disappear, and now I've hidden the targets for those shapes. Now I'm going to go to Objects 2, and I'm going to click in this empty box on the left-hand side right here. A V will show up, and then I can see that I have these 4 new objects here, and then I'll click on Targets 2, click right there. The V shows up, so that shows those other objects in my scene. So now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to move each of these spheres into the corresponding larger sphere of the same color. Alright, so I'm back and I've got all 4 of my spheres in the correct targets. Let's go ahead and save our work one more time. I'm going to click on File and then go down to Save Scene. And now I'm going to open up a new file. I'm going to go back up to the menu, click on File, and I'm going to go down to Open Scene. And I'm going to open up channelbox2.ma. Alright, so for this exercise, we're not only going to move along the Z-axis and the X-axis, but we're also going to move up and down along the Y-axis. Okay? So I'm going to do the first sphere here. I'll do this one with you, and then I'm going to let you do the rest of these on your own. So I can see right here, if I'm going to move this sphere, I want to actually follow the guided path in order to reach this target, okay? If I count these arrows, I got 1, 2, 3, 4 arrows going along the x-axis. You can see over here, this is positive x. So I'm going to go over here to translate x. I'm going to type in a value of 4 and then press return. Okay, so I've moved along the arrows here. Now I need to change directions, and I want to use my other guides here to tell me which direction to go. So these arrows are pointing up. The green axis right here is the y-axis. So we're going to use the y channel over here, and I'm going to count 2 arrows, 1, 2. So I'll type in 2 right here. Now, if I were to type in -2, you can see the sphere is going to go down. So make sure you type in a value of +2. All right, so now I'm going to look at my grid here and determine which direction am I going to go next. Is it X, is it Y, or is it Z? And these arrows are sort of parallel with the Z axis right here. So I'm going to type in a value on my translate Z channel over here. Now this right here is the origin, and this direction is +Z, but I'm going in the opposite direction. So I'm going to type in a negative number. I'm going to type in -1. You can see I've moved 1 arrow. I've got 1 more arrow to go, so I'll type in -2 and then press return. So that's how you do the second exercise. I'd like you to do the green, purple, and blue spheres on your own, and then go up to File and Save Your Work. Click on the red cube. I'll press F. Let's do red 6. So I'm going to tumble, find the number 6 right here, and now I've sort of completed the task. All right, so I'm going to hit A, and let's do purple 2. So I'll press F to frame it. I'm going to find the number 2. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, I don't want to see it upside down. I want to see it right side up, so I'm going to continue to tumble until it's showing correctly on the screen here. All right, I'm going to hit A, show all my objects. Let's do green 5. So I'll hit F. I'm going to tumble, find the number 5, keep tumbling until that's showing right side up. All right, I'm going to hit A. I'll just tumble back to our normal scene. The default for your scene in perspective is always y-axis is up, so that green line pointing up. X-axis is going in this direction, and the z-axis is going this way. So this is sort of like the default how you view your scene. Okay, that's it for this meeting. Please raise your hand and ask the instructor. Let's begin that file and hit the Open button. It says, warning, scene not saved. That's okay. We're just going to hit Don't Save. All right, so what I want to do is I want to show you how to move your camera around in 3D space in Maya. In order to do this, we have to make sure that your mouse is set up for a 3-button mouse. So I'm just going to click on the desktop, and that's going to change my menu up here to the standard Apple menu. I'm going to go over to the Apple and then go to System Preferences. All right, so from here, I'm going to click on the mouse. So this is the arrangement that you want for your mouse. For your left click, it's going to say Primary. For middle click right here, it's going to say Button 3, and then for the right click, you want to make sure it's set to Secondary. So if you have this set up for your mouse, you'll be able to do the exercise correctly. All right, let's go ahead and close this. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is tumble the camera. Basically what we want to do is rotate our camera around the objects in the scene. So I'm going to need to use both hands for this. So with your left hand, you're going to hold down the Option key. The Option key is between the Command key and the Control key. So I'm going to hold down Option with my left hand. With my right hand, I'm going to hold down the left mouse button. Okay. So I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to left click, And if I hold down both of those at once, I can then push the mouse to the left or right or up or down, and I can rotate my camera around the objects in the scene. Okay, so once again, I'm going to hold down the Option key with my left hand, and I'm going to left click on the mouse. Okay, so as I hold both of these down, I can move the mouse and tumble the camera to any point on the scene. Okay, so let's try this. Let's try tumbling the camera so that we see number 1 on all 4 of these boxes. So hold down the Option key, I'm going to left click and find the number 1. Where is it? There it is. So just tumble your camera so that you can see all 4 ones on the boxes here. Okay, so now I'm going to hold down the Option key, I'm going to left click, and I'm going to tumble till I see the number 5. But I don't want to see the 5s upside down. I want to continue to tumble until all 4 of the 5s are displaying right side up. All right, let's do one more. I'm going to tumble so I can see all the number 3. So I want all 4 cubes to display the number 3 on the scene. Okay, great. So now we're going to do a different camera move. You're going to hold down the Option key with your left hand, and with your right hand, you're going to hold down the middle mouse button. That's the small gray button in the middle of the top part of the mouse. So Option and middle mouse button, and this allows you to pan left, pan right, pan up, and pan down. Okay, so once again, Option plus the middle mouse button, and we can pan around our scene. Let's say I want to center the red cube right here. So right now I've panned so that the red cube is sort of in the center of my panel right here. There's one more camera move that I want to show you, and that is the dolly. Okay, so dolly means that you're either getting closer to the object or you're getting further away from the object. So I'm going to hold down the Option key, and then I'm going to hold down the right mouse button, and I'm going to drag my mouse right to get closer, and I'm going to drag it left to get further away. Okay, so I'm going to dolly in closer by dragging to the right. If you hold down the Option key and you drag up and down, it's not as effective. Hold down the Option key, drag left to dolly back, and drag right to dolly forward. Okay, so I just want to center this. So I'm going to hold down Option and the middle mouse button, and I'll pan so that that cube is showing up in the center of the panel. All right, I'm going to show you a new key now. Let's say you want to zoom out or dolly back so you can see all of the objects in your scene. In order to do that, you're going to press the A key, A for all. So I'm going to hit A on the keyboard, and now I can see all of the objects. All right, so let's do a different cube. Let's pan and dolly in on the blue cube. So I'll hold down Option and middle mouse, and I'm going to pan so that the blue cube is sort of in the center of the panel right here. And then I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to use the right mouse button, and I'm going to drag my mouse, push it to the right, and I'm going to just dolly in close. I'm going to fill this cube with kind of center the cube and fill it in the panel here. Okay, so once again, if I want to make an adjustment like up or down, left or right, that's Option middle mouse. Okay, and if I want to get closer, Option right mouse button. Okay, so once again, I want to go dolly back and see all the objects, so I'm going to press A. All right, let's do one more. I want to dolly and pan so that the number 3 right here is in the center. So I'll start Option middle mouse. I'm going to drag up so that it's sort of in the middle of the panel, and then I'm going to Option key and then right mouse button, drag to the right and get closer. Okay, I'm not quite in the center here, so I'm going to hold down Option and then middle mouse button, and now I'm in the center. I've centered the object in the panel. All right, so let's hit A and show all the objects. And now I'm going to show you a shortcut. Okay, so if I want to bring my camera close to a specific object in the scene, I can select that object. So I've clicked on it, right? You just click on it, it highlights in green, and then you press F to frame it. Okay, once you've framed it, you can tumble, right? So I'm going to use Option and the left mouse button to tumble. When you tumble, notice how it pivots around that object. Okay, so if I hit A, I go out here. Let's say I want to tumble around this green cube. I'll select it, hit F, and then I hold down the Option and the left mouse button, and I can tumble and view this cube at any angle that I want. Okay. All right, so let's press A one more time. And I'm going to call out a color and a number, and then I want you to navigate to that cube and show me that number, the color and the number. Fill it in the screen. All right. So I'm going to click on the red cube. I'll press F. Let's do red 6. So I'm going to tumble, find the number 6 right here, and now I've sort of completed the task. All right, so I'm going to hit A, and let's do purple 2. So I'll press F to frame it and find the number 2. Where is it? Here it is. Okay, I don't want to see it upside down. I want to see it right side up, so I'm going to continue to tumble until it's showing correctly on the screen here. All right, I'm going to hit A, show all my objects. Let's do green 5. So I'll hit F. I'm going to tumble, find the number 5. Keep tumbling until that's showing right side up. All right, I'm going to hit A. I'll just tumble back to our normal scene. The default for your scene in perspective is always y-axis is up, so that green line pointing up. X-axis is going in this direction, and the z-axis is going this way. So this is sort of like the default how you view your scene. Okay, that's it for this exercise. If you have any questions about tumbling, panning, or dollying, let's open that up. I don't need to save this scene. I'm going to click on Don't Save. All right, so what we have here is a very simple exercise designed to help us learn how to use the Rotate tool. If we look over here at our toolbar on the left-hand side, we have our Selection tool, we have our Move tool. This button right here is the Rotate tool. So, like, for example, if I click here and then click on the Rotate tool, that will bring up the gizmo right here. Before we start using this gizmo in the perspective panel, I want to just go to Rotate X right here, and I'm going to change this value to 0. And I'm going to change the Rotate Y value and the Rotate Z value. So make sure after you type in this number, you press the return key. All right, so now this red arm is going straight up into the air. There's no Rotate X, Y, or Z. It's all at 0. Okay. So I've got my Rotate tool on right here. So if I'm on my Selection tool, I want to select this. I could then, once again, click on this button right here for the Rotate tool. If I wanted to rotate this arm along the X-axis, I would click and drag on this red circle right here. You want to be careful that you don't click and drag at a point where the red line meets the blue line or the red line meets the green line. Click and drag right sort of on the red circle away from the other colors. Okay, so I'm going to click, hold, and I can drag this way. You can see I've rotated on X -50 degrees. Now, once I've clicked on that and selected it, it turns from red to yellow. If I click away and then click back on this, I've still got it. It's set to yellow right here. So I know this is still the X-axis, so I'm going to click and drag here and go the other way. And so now I have a positive value on Rotate X of 71. In order to see that red color again, I'm going to have to click on a different line. So if I rotate, I'm going to click and drag on the blue line right here. You can see now that blue line turns yellow. That's the highlighted axis that we're working on, and our red line comes back. Okay, so let's go ahead and like zero all this stuff out again. So I'm just going to click here, drag down. I'll type in 0, press return. Okay, so we're back up to our default position. All right, so right here, this is the Z-axis, right? So if I click and drag on this right here. I'm going to rotate on Z only. So you can see rotate Z, that's a value of positive 42. If I click on this and drag the other way, we've got a negative value going this way, right? So I'll click on that, type in 0, and then the last option we have is rotate Y. So if I click and drag on this green circle right here, you can see I'm rotating along the Y-axis. So the cylinder is spinning, but it's not moving in any direction towards any of these rings. All right, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to press 0 on the keyboard and then press return. All right, so now if you want to rotate on one axis at a time, you click on an individual color right here. If you want to rotate on multiple axes at the same time, you click in between these circles, right? So if I want to rotate on X, Y, and Z all at the same time, I'd click right here and drag. You can see if you watch the numbers over here as I click in this space, you can see all those numbers are moving. I'm moving along all of these axes at the same time. So the objective is to move this red arm through that red ring. So I don't need to necessarily do this one ring at a time, one axis at a time. It's much faster for me to just do all of them at once, right? Now I think I got that in the target, but I might just tumble my camera. So Option left mouse and just check and make sure. It looks like I got it in there. Cool. All right, so I'm going to hit A. I'll tumble my camera. Let's do a different color. I'm going to select the purple arm right here. Now once again, you click inside in between the lines to go on all axes. So I'm going to click here and kind of drag. I've sort of reached the edge of the circle, so I'll just let go and click and drag again and try and move that. So right now it's a little hard to get it in the ring. So to make it easier, I'm just going to tumble my camera. Right? Now I can see much easier, have a better angle to move that into the target. So I might just hit A and then tumble again. So I've got a couple more options here. I'm going to do the green. So I will click in here and just sort of rotate it towards the target, tumble my camera, go further. Okay. So blue, click and drag over this way. I overshot it. That's okay. I'll just drag back right like that. And then we'll do the gold or yellow. So I'll just drag over this way. And there we have it. We've moved all of the arms into the appropriate ring. All right, let's go ahead and save our work. I'm going to click on File and then pull down to Save Scene. All right, so those are the basics for using the Rotate tool in Autodesk Maya. Go ahead and take your mouse and navigate up to this top bar right here. This is called your shelf, and by default, you're probably on the mental ray shelf. You might be under a different shelf. It doesn't really matter which tab you're under. If you don't see any of these tabs, you can click on this gear over here on the left-hand side. So I can click and hold here, and I can turn the shelf tabs off. I can click and hold and turn the shelf tabs back on. If you don't see any shelf at all, no tabs, no buttons, you can go up to Windows and then you can pull down to UI Elements, and here you can turn off the shelf. I'll go back to Windows and then UI Elements, and I'll turn the shelf back on right here. So we're going to be making polygon primitives, so let's switch to the Poly Modeling tab. All right, over here on the left-hand side, I have a sphere, a cube, cylinder, cone, etc. Let's go ahead and click on the button for the sphere. I'm just going to click on that once, and it's going to drop a sphere in my scene. Over here, it says P-Sphere 1. I can rename this to something like, let's say, basketball. Right? Okay. Then I could take this object, press W for my move tool, or I can select the move tool right here. So once again, this is my selection tool. Here's my move tool. I'm just going to move this over. Okay.
All right, so now let's create another polygon primitive. So I'm going to go back up to the shelf over here. I'm going to click on the cube. Okay, so here I have a cube, and let's move this over here. And let's say we want a pair of dice. Okay, so I'll create another cube, drag this over here, and now we've got two pairs of dice, and let's rename this. So let's call this die 01, and this one, we'll click on it, and we'll name this die 02. Okay. All right, let's go back up to the shelf. I'm going to click on the cylinder. Okay, and let's move this over somewhere else. And let's see, what could this cylinder be? Let's call this a can, right? So I'll rename this to maybe, let's say, soda can. Okay, so I have a name on there. So whenever you create an object, the first thing you want to do is you want to give that object a name, because when you're working in Maya, you could have hundreds and hundreds of different objects in your scene, and the easiest way to locate something is if you have named all these objects. It's much easier to group the objects, sort them, or find them by searching for the name. So you always want to name each object that you create in Maya. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other options here. So if I were to click right here on the object right here, over here in the channel box, I can rename the object here, but also I have some inputs. I can click right here on polycylinder 1, and over here I can change the radius manually. So let's say I want to change it to 2. Okay, so that no longer looks like a soda can, so let's change it back to 1. But let's say we want to make the can a little bit taller, because right now it doesn't feel like it's the right height. So I could go over here to the height, and I could change this to 3, press return, and now that feels more like an actual soda can. So I'll hit W, move this up a little bit higher on the grid. So there we go. The same is true, we can modify these other polygon primitive shapes. So if I go to the sphere right here, I can click on polysphere 1, and I could change the radius. So I could increase the radius, or I could decrease the radius, right? And then I also have the option to change the number of faces on this object. So where it says subdivisions axis 20 and the subdivisions height, I can change this number. So if I wanted to have less faces on this object, I could change this to 10, and I could change the height to 10. You can see now I have a more primitive shape here. It's not quite as smooth. Okay. So now we also have more polygon primitives that we can create, but they're not by default on the shelf up here. To access some of the other primitives, I'll have to go to Create, and then I'll have to go down to Polygon Primitives, and here you can see we have more options. One of the options that I'll often use is the polygon pipe. Okay, so this is really helpful. I find I'm using this quite a bit when modeling hard surface objects. So just as with the other shapes here, I can rename this. So I could rename this to, I can make this a ring. And then here under polygon pipe, I might change the radius. Or let's see, let's change the height to 1. Let's change the thickness to 0.2. And that looks more like a ring that you could put on your finger. Okay. So those are the basics of creating polygon primitives in Maya. Let's go ahead and save this file. I'm going to go down to File and then Save Scene. And because we didn't start with a file, we're going to have to go ahead and name this. So I'm going to call this poly primitives. And then down here under files of type, I'm going to change this from Maya binary to Maya ASCII. That's going to give it the .ma extension. So go ahead and hit Save As. And that concludes our introduction to polygon primitives in Return. I'm going to change the height to 14. Press Return. And I'm going to change the depth to 6 and then press Return. All right, so this is going to be the foundation of the castle tower. And now what I want to do is I want to click on this object, and I want to hit W, and I want to move this up. Okay, I want to sort of sit on top of the grid right here. Now, I'm not entirely sure that that is right on the grid here. So what I'm going to do is I'll just hit A. I can see the entire object now. And then I'm going to go to my 4-panel view. Now I can do that by pressing this button right here to switch to the 4-panel view. Or if I want to, I can just tap the space bar. And here I've got all 4 panels: perspective, top, front, and side view. So I'm just going to press A in each of these panels, and then I'm going to dolly back a little bit. All right, now let's take a look at the side view. I'm going to tap the space bar with my mouse over the side view, and I can see that the tower is not quite on that line right there. Now, an easy way that I can get it right on that line is I can use the snap tool. So all I have to do is hold down the X key. Okay, I'm going to hold down X. You can see when I do that, this part of the move tool changes. Okay, so I'm going to hold down X, and I'm going to click and drag on the Y-axis. You can see it's snapping to the grid. And I'm just going to snap it to this point right here where it's sitting right on that darker line. So I'm going to hit A. I'll dolly back a little bit. And then I'm going to tap the spacebar and go back to my 4-panel view, and I can see that now that object is sitting right on the grid. All right, let's create another shape. All right, I'm going to click on the polygon cube button one more time. I'm going to use the blue arrow. I'm going to drag this forward, and I'm going to type in some dimensions for this. Right now, I've got all 4 panels up. I'm going to move my mouse over the perspective panel, tap the spacebar, and I'm now going to change the dimensions of this new cube. Before I do that, I'm going to call this upper wall. So down here under inputs, I'm going to click on polycube 2. And right here, I'm going to change the width right here to 8. I'll press return. I'll change the height to 4. Press return. I'll leave the depth at 1. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to move this up to the top of the tower. So I'm going to tap the spacebar, and I'll click over here. I'm going to drag this up and sort of line it up with the top of the tower right here. And then I'm going to go over here to my side view, and I'm going to click on the blue arrow here, drag this over. And so I've sort of have this lined up right here. It's not quite, these 2 corners right here are not quite touching. And I think I can use the channel box over here to make some more precise movements. So if I click on this and I round this to the nearest whole number, 16, and then press return, you can see that's moved down to the line right there on the grid. And then if I go to Translate Z and change this to just 3.5, it lines up. So those 2 corners are now lined up. And I feel like I've placed my wall in the appropriate location. Cool. All right, I'm going to tap the spacebar, go back to the perspective panel. All right, I'm going to create one more cube. I'll click on this yellow arrow, drag it forward. And I'm going to drag this up. And I want to put this on top of the wall. So I'm just going to call this brick. Okay. All right, so I'm going to tap the spacebar, and I'm going to move this into place. So I'm going to get a little bit closer in my front view. Move this down so it's sitting right on top of that wall. Go over here to my side view, and I'll move this over. Okay. And I'll go back again to my Translate Y and Translate Z. I'm going to try 18.5 for Translate Y. And Translate Z, again, 3.5. So now if I zoom in, I can see that's pretty close to in fact, it's exactly where I want it to be. Okay. So it's a little bit hard to sometimes see the edges of these objects. So what I'm going to do is over here in the perspective panel, I'm going to turn on a display setting called wireframe on shaded. That's right over here. I'm going to click on this button. And now you can see the outline of the object as well as the shading on it. Okay. So I'm going to tap the spacebar, and I'm going to do the same thing in all the other panels. Okay. So I'm going to click on this button right here, wireframe on shaded, and over here as well. Okay. So now I can see that cube a little bit easier in these other panels. All right, let's go to the front panel. I'm going to tap the spacebar, and I'll dolly in a little bit. Okay. I'm going to click on the brick right here, and I want to create a duplicate of this brick. So I could create a new brick right here, but then I have to move it into place, and I sort of want to work with the positioning of this brick that I have sitting on top of this wall. So to duplicate the object, I'm going to press Command D. D for duplicate, right? And now I can look over here in the channel box, it says brick 1. If I move this over, I can see there's in fact a second brick right there. So I click on this, you can see this is our original brick. Click on this one, we've got brick 1. I'm going to move this over, all the way over to the edge of the castle wall. And so let's say this is going to be, translate X is going to be 3.5, and then I'll press return. All right, so I'm going to click on the brick in the middle right here. I'll press Command D to duplicate. I'll move it to this side over here. Okay, and translate X is going to be negative 3.5. I'll press return. So now we have 3 of the 5 bricks that we need. I'll click on this middle brick again. I'm going to press Command D to duplicate. I'm going to slide this over. I'm going to sort of like try and estimate the middle position between this brick and this brick right here. If we look at our translate X, it's at 1.7. And I think we need to change it to 1.75, and then we'll be right in the middle. I'll click over here, hit Command D, and then I'm going to move this over. And again, this is going to be negative 1.75, and that should put it right in between those other 2 bricks. So now I should have 5 bricks evenly spaced apart on the upper wall right here. So I'm going to hit A, and you can see we have a nice silhouette of our castle tower. I'll press the space bar. I'll hit A over here as well. So we have one of the 4 walls that we need. And what I'd like to do is I would like to group all of these objects together so that when I duplicate it, I'm going to get not only the upper wall, but all the bricks that go along with it. Okay, so right now these are all seen from Maya's perspective as different standalone objects. But if I click and drag, I can select all these objects right here, and I can go up to Edit, and I go down to Group, or I can press Command G to group. Okay? So you can see when I group these items, they all turn green, and it gives me a name, Group 1. So I would call this actually Upper Wall Group. Okay? Now, I can still select these objects individually, right? And I could still move them individually if I wanted to. Okay, so they haven't been combined into one object. But if I click on one of the objects in the group and then I press the up arrow, it gives me everything in that group, and it also gives me what's called a new node. I can see right here that the move tool for this group, whenever you group objects, the move tool or the pivot point for that group goes back to the origin of the scene. And this is actually helpful because if we duplicate and rotate this, we can just spin it to the other side. So once again, if I select the individual objects, you can see the pivot point for those objects is still in the middle of that object. But if I select an object and press the up arrow and go to the group, I'm now on the upper wall group, I can see that the pivot point for that goes back to the origin. So let's do this in the top view. I'm going to move my mouse over the top panel, tap the spacebar, and then I'm going to switch to my rotate tool. So I can click over here on the rotate tool button, or I can press E. Right here you can see the shortcut is displaying. So I'll press E for my rotate tool. Now I have the group selected, upper wall group. I can press Command D to duplicate that group. And then what I can do is I can go over here and I can rotate this 180 degrees. Okay. So I did 180.749. It's not quite right. So let me go in here and change this to 180. All right. So now I can see over here, if I click on an object in this group, hit the up arrow, it says upper wall group. Click on an object over here, press the up arrow, I have upper wall group 1. Okay, so put a number 1 after that. Let's tap the spacebar and let's look at this in the perspective panel. So we've got now 2 walls for our castle tower. Now the other 2 walls, I'm going to need a different size object here. So I'm going to create another cube. I'll hit W for my move tool, and I'm going to move this out. And the dimensions for this, let's just call this upper wall, and this is going to be the short version of the upper wall. Okay, it's a little bit shorter. I'll click on Polycube 4, and I'm going to leave the width at 1. I'll change the height to 4, press return, and I'll change the depth to 6, and then press return. I'm going to move this wall up, and then I'm going to tap the spacebar, go back to my 4-panel view. I can see in the top panel over here, I want to move this over, and let's see, in the side panel here, I'm going to move it down. So translate Y16, translate X should be 3.5. So now I have that wall placed correctly. And now I'm going to steal a few of these bricks. Okay, so I'm going to hit Q for my selection tool, or I can use the button over here to choose the selection tool. And I'm going to click on this object. Now I want to select multiple objects, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, and I'll select the second brick and the third brick right here. So I have 3 bricks selected. Now I want to be able to move these over to this wall, so I'm going to group these, and that's going to break them apart from this group, but that's okay. We can go back and fix that later. So I'll hit Command G to group them. Okay, and we'll just call this group 3 bricks. Okay, so if I hit W, I can see that again the pivot point is right here in the center of the scene. Perfect. That means I can rotate this and place it. All I have to do is rotate this 90 degrees. So I'll hit E for my rotate tool. I'll hit Command D to duplicate. I'll rotate this 90 degrees this way, right here. And see right here, rotate Y is at -89. Let's just change that to -90 and press return. All right, so now I can select all of these and create another group and rotate it 180 degrees. So I'll hit Q for my selection tool. All right, I'll select these. I'm going to hold down Shift to select multiple objects. So I'll hold down the Shift key, click on all the objects that I want in the group, and then I'm going to go up to Edit Group, or I can hit Command G. So let's call this group, and this is the short wall. Okay. Perfect. All right, so now let's duplicate this. I'm going to do this in the top panel. I'll hit Command D. I'm going to switch over here to my rotate tool. I'm going to rotate this around 180 degrees. So we'll change this from 177 to 180. And now I've got 4 walls on the top of my castle tower. So I can click on one of these. I'll hit Q, hit the up arrow. I can see that this group is still displaying correctly. If I click over here and press the up arrow, that group is also okay. Click over here, press the up arrow. That group looks good. Click over here, press the up arrow. So now all of these are grouped together appropriately. We've got all of our objects named. We are all set. If you'd like to, you can turn off the wireframe on shaded right here and just sort of view it without the outlines. So let's go ahead and save this file. So I'm going to go up to File and go down to Save Scene, and I'll type in Castle Tower. And once again, I want to make sure I'm saving it as a Maya ASCII file. That'll give me the .ma extension. So Castle Tower, let me make sure I've spelled this correctly. And then I'll go down here and hit Save As. And there you go. You've created your first scene in Autodesk Maya.